Hey, deserving listeners, this is part 2 in my review of the drama regarding Linus and all that has been happening. And I'm also going to eventually evaluate and grade his apology, so let's watch.
It's tone deaf, to say the least. Overall, the attitude with which Linus approached this whole thing was just a really bad look, because even though Billet Labs sounds like an official name, ultimately, it's just a startup involving 2 people trying to innovate the PC space. And to be frank, it is always a bad look when the bigger, more successful company is seen more or less putting down the little guy. That story never turns out well.
I didn't know that. That's Billet Labs. I thought they were a giant tech business, but they're just 2 people. So yeah, that's another factor.
But it gets worse. After the review was posted, Billet Labs asked for their one-of-one best prototype back so they could continue working on their product. LMG responded not once, but twice, saying that they would get their product back to them, only to have it auctioned off at the convention that I went to about a month later after these events.
Right. So I did hear that Linus eventually says that he, there's 100+ employees, and there was a clerical error that led to this happening. The way that Christopher Yee lays it out, it's hard to imagine that, right? That they were asking for it back. There's 2 emails or something, and then they don't actually send it back, but instead they auction it off. Yeah, I mean, if they're in the middle of the drama, which I think it was, and then this happens, it's like, why would you do this? And I guess what people might think is that behind the scenes, Linus is just like cynically thinking, I don't care, but I'm still going to make a profit off of this, so please auction it off and screw the audience and screw this small business. Maybe, but probably not. Maybe it was a clerical error. I don't know.
The mouse wasn't actually removed during the review.
LMG then eventually began the process of replacing the video in place. Once again, we assume this time with YouTube's trim tool. That'll take a day or 2 to process. They're cutting the section about friction, but this doesn't fix the problem. They are choosing to leave the content live, whose conclusions were at least partially based on massively erroneous work, because they don't want to hurt their video performance.
Okay, I actually know a little bit about this from behind the scenes. So in terms of our process, I don't know what they were going through, but I do know that process of clipping things out of a video, which is, I'm going to take a guess and say that either Linus himself or maybe others were involved in the accusation, which I think is probably accurate, that the media group was interested in making money, not interested in actually providing quality information or even caring about the consumer or the manufacturers of these products. And I think this really exemplifies it, that they reviewed a product and didn't take the plastic off the bottom of the mouse, and the guy that was reviewing it said it had too much friction. And when that was told to them, they apparently acknowledged it. The Linus Media Group said, oh, okay, so we're going to not take the video down because it's still making money, so we will clip it out. And this is the part that I know about, that when you ask, you actually go into your videos on YouTube, the things you've uploaded, and you can tell it to clip certain parts out. You say like, okay, from X to Y, I want that to be clipped out. And for some reason, it can take YouTube several hours if I don't know exactly, because actually my wife, I point behind me because her office is right behind that wall, that she takes care of that. But from my understanding is it takes a strange amount of time, because you would think that it wouldn't take that much time. And so I'm guessing that they were acknowledging that, saying, okay, we've already told YouTube to clip it out, but it takes a while for that to go through. In the meantime, we're not going to take the video down, which is, you would think out of all the videos that they make on the various channels, that you'd think they would just take the video down. And especially if they're trying to instill confidence and trust, especially in the midst of all this drama, they would just make another video and they would spend the money on that and say, oh my God, we made a mistake. It happens. I'm sorry. I want to apologize to the manufacturers. I'm now taking the plastic off. I'm now going to review it. It's actually a lot better than I reviewed. There's still a couple problems or, whatever. Why wouldn't you do that? The only thing I can think of is that there's a culture in this business of you have to produce. You just have to keep, because I'm going to take a guess, and I've heard other accounts of the employees, the people who make the videos, that they actually are asking for more time, but not given it, right? So yeah. It sounds like this has been a wake-up call to that culture that has been maybe slowly, developed over time. And it worked because it did make them a lot of money, but it has this huge vulnerability.
To be honest, this is fucked up. You do not expect the top consumer tech media company in the world to make a mistake like not removing the plastic before reviewing a mouse. But holy shit, is it funny. He was so confidently unimpressed by a product that he didn't even unbox properly that it almost gave me Stefan Etienne vibes from The Verge.
This is not a smooth mouse, and that's really disappointing.
And you would think that the people in power, the people who have the power to take down a video, would be so embarrassed by it. Because I'm guessing this guy might have even asked, could you just take that video down? Because it's pretty bad that I didn't know that. It's embarrassing. And you would think that they would want to take this down. So another factor is that, because I've seen in other accounts that they showed this like flow chart that they have regarding their content provision, and it was complicated. And I get it, because as someone that makes content in my little way, yeah, there's a lot of steps in the flow chart. Most of them are in my head and my wife's head. Like the flow chart is, and we've developed it over time. We don't have it written down. We probably should, but if I had 120 employees, everyone coordinating different kinds, because from getting the product, identifying the product that should be got, and then identifying the person and the channel that's going to do that, how long the video should, what style it should be, who needs to sign off on that, to actually making the video, and then you have the production team, you have the person that records the audio, you have the person that makes the video, maybe there's multiple things like that. You have the editors, there's a whole flowchart, and the stuff has to get out quickly because these products become obsolete pretty quickly, right? You don't have 12 months to do that process. Typically, you've got to move as fast as you can. So I also imagine that given the culture and the demands on that flowchart, that the decision-making process for taking a video down might be so convoluted and take so much time, and there's so many different memos that need to be sent or boxes that need to be checked by administration, that in the interim, they're just like, well, we're not going to take it down because that's not our policy until we get the word from Jake in administration that we should, you imagine that there could be something like that as well. Or it's a problem, the way that people are talking about this is that Linus is a jerkface who pushes his employees and doesn't give a crap about the consumer. And, that's possible, but I imagine it's probably something more akin to what I was saying earlier, just the sheer volume and the fact that they can put out as much as they put out and have most of it be accurate and most of it be good content is a feat in and of itself, right? Not to make an excuse for them, but I think that just needs to be taken into consideration.
Off by saying her daily obligations and her weekly obligations were insanely overwhelming, and they are now handled by an entire team at LMG. She said that she was belittled by upper management, calling her work dog shit and her incompetent. Also being told that she has to put on her big girl pants and to be more assertive. To which she later states she was then called a bitch, bossy, and quote, to calm her tits by a male employee.
Yikes. Okay, well, it's one person's allegations, but we've heard it before, this sort of thing, especially in male-oriented spaces like tech, where it is well known that women are treated in a very hostile manner. Sexual harassment is rampant in these spaces, not all, but often. I think research shows that, certainly anecdote shows that. So it's not hard to believe. Now, is that Linus's fault? Who knows? Possibly partially his fault, but it also could have nothing to do with him. There could be a set of managers or coworkers that, I mean, I'm going to take a guess and say that Linus literally doesn't even know some of his employees, doesn't even know them by face or name. Who knows? But maybe Linus is a part of that. Maybe he does this sort of thing. I'm not hearing that. What I'm hearing is that there is another employee or a set of employees that were doing this sort of thing. And it's just allegations. We can't know for sure. But there's there's a way that allegations sound that make them sound a little bit more credible. I never bank everything on one person's account. But when someone has a lot of these kinds of allegations and they are in the category of the sort of thing that you've heard before in other kind of spaces like this, then it's not hard to imagine that it at least could be partially, if not fully, true. There could be other women or other people at this organization that are experiencing it as well, and this is just one person that is brave enough to step forward. So, okay, yeah, all right. Well, now you would hope that Linus then would step forward. And now another possibility is that Linus could immediately want to do that, but then lawyers could step in and say, you can't do X, Y, and Z because that admits fault, and we're in the midst of a legal battle. But there's still something you can say usually. So hopefully Linus makes it right after this.
She says she never talked about this originally when leaving LMG 2 years ago because she didn't want to face the backlash from the community and potentially harm her future career options because LMG is deeply connected within the consumer tech industry.
Right. Yeah. Not only are oppressed groups like women being mistreated in spaces like this and in lots of spaces, but they can't step forward because the abuse will become even worse. It's a really sad state of affairs that we have, communities and cultures that are like this. It's just awful. Just imagine an analogy to this. I always like to think of an analogy to really drive it home. Imagine that you are, your neighbor comes over to your house and on camera steals your bike. And you go, hey, you're stealing my bike. And he's like, screw you, I'm going to take your bike. And then takes it over to his house. And, he's now driving it around the neighborhood. And let's just say, for the sake of argument, it literally has your name engraved on the side, okay, property of. And you know that if you call the authorities or tell your neighbors or tell anyone or even tweet about it, that everyone will attack you and say that there's something wrong with you and you're disgusting, and they dox you, and you're now being victimized more. Not only is your bike now gone and you can see it being ridden around by someone, but now other people are coming to your house stealing your lawnmower and your car or whatever, and you still can't do anything about it. That's what happens to people in situations like this. They're being treated in a criminal way, at the very least in an unethical, harmful way, and yet they know they can't speak up about it because the abuse will be worse. It grinds my gears. It just does.
I have some opinions on this, but I'll keep it short by saying, yeah, that's pretty fucking bad. LMG responded by tweeting out, "We are taking Madison's allegations seriously. We are conducting an internal assessment alongside bringing in a third-party investigator to look into the allegations." I don't know. I feel every company or corporation who finds itself in a scandal ends up doing this type of thing, and it very rarely actually amounts to anything.
Yeah, it depends on the third party. It depends on how the powers that be within the Linus Media Group actually take action, because the third party could provide recommendations. You can work out contracts with a third party that says, look, you're an outside party and you're coming in and you're going to investigate, but any communication, and all communication, is confidential between us. So and that often is the case, right? And lawyers would probably recommend that, right? So unless you allow the outside party to have some amount of power to actually tell people, look, you have to change this or else, or the power to out the corporation if they don't take action, then it's useless, because the outside party could find all sorts of horrific things, provide recommendations to the administration, and the administration could be like, okay, duly noted, and then throw it away. And if they have a confidentiality agreement, then nothing ever happens. And it was just a big PR stunt. So the proof's in the pudding, right?
I'm not sure how investigating something that happened so long ago is going to help bring anything else to light. If there were any actual remarks, they would have been done in person. People can lie about...
I think there's tremendous value. I mean, Christopher Yee is really helpful, so I don't want to criticize him, but I think there's a lot of good that could come from this if there's a culture, which there often is, of this sort of thing, of checks and balances not being in place to catch these sorts of things, or for HR not to be robust enough to be able to assure employees that they can come to them confidentially and action will be taken. You know, if you don't have a culture of that, if there's not a program in place around this sort of thing, then this sort of investigation could illuminate that and initiate those changes. But you have to actually try to make those changes. And usually it is a culture. You know, the kinds of things that that a former employee was alleging, it doesn't sound like it's one bad apple. It sounds like there's at least a cultural pocket, if not a widespread culture of literal misogyny and just unprofessional behavior.
What they said, and emails can be deleted. It seems very bleak, to be honest. Don't get me wrong, I think this is the right thing to do, and realistically, the only thing that you can do if you're LMG right now. I don't think they can avoid to further lose public face, and honestly...
But I'll tell you, and maybe I'm wrong, but if I were Linus, given that he is the figurehead, and I think in a long essay that he wrote that was highly defensive, I think he was saying, look, this is a large organization, and I am not responsible for everything that happens here because that's not humanly possible. And okay, you can point that out, but at the same time, you are the figurehead. It's named after you. You would just think that Linus would understand that and use that and step forward and say, look, there have been some allegations. I can't get into it because of legal reasons. We're going to be doing an internal investigation. But I want to be clear that if something like that happened, that is atrocious. The fact that this happened or could have happened a couple years ago is giving me a tremendous amount of distress, because I thought I had created something that was good, and now I'm wondering if I didn't create something, or at least as partially bad to employees. And so I'm really worried about that, and believe me, I'm going to look. He could have said something like that. I don't understand why these people don't do that kind of thing. It's always just defensive, and when they do apologize, it doesn't address the problem.
I was asked for unflinching, and here it is. Linus is a human gas molecule. You've been telling him for years, and I've been telling him for years. Staying relevant on YouTube is hard for everyone, but we aren't fighting for survival anymore, and we don't need to run at this pace.
Right. So this is the bit that I saw earlier, that I was basing my comments on the possibility that Linus is anxiety-driven to put out more and more content, to bank enough money to get you through the difficult times. And it seems like maybe Linus literally even has traumas growing up related to this somehow, that eclipses his better judgment when he's just constantly trying to put out more and more content. Because, you put out more content and you make more money, even if the content isn't very good, right? So it sounds like that's what other people noticed around Linus. It's just like, hey, you don't need to be doing this.
To make our jobs easier. But the actual testing is not the biggest source of our recent struggles. It's the human factor. There have been times when an internal video review caught an incorrect graph, resulting in new versions of the graph being created, only for those new graphs to not be put in the video. Just about every error that has appeared in a video in the past year has directly resulted in a process change designed to prevent that specific issue from ever happening again.
Yeah, so I was speaking to this in an earlier segment, that I imagine the flowchart is pretty complicated, And even if you do catch errors, the process to actually correct for that error, there's so many different things, and maybe one person is on vacation and the whole thing is shut down, the flowchart is shut down, or someone has a really deep inbox of unread emails and they just haven't gotten to that yet. So you have to rework. I mean, when you have over 100 employees all working on different parts of a video, including the editing of things, then yeah, you're going to run into mistakes. I mean, for me, I am a small operation. Most of the content creation is just me sitting here. I film it, I light it, I edit it, I post it, I review it, and I have other people that do other things as well, posting and editing and that kind of thing to help me out. But yeah, I would guess 90% of it is me. And I make mistakes all the time, especially when things get complicated. And sometimes you'll see the mistakes in an episode where a whole section will just be blank or something. And when that happens, it's distressing. It's like, how did that happen? I didn't intend on that happening. What was happening there? And for example, if people sometimes will email me or comment and say, hey, Kirk, there's a mistake in this episode. If I don't see that, or I'm on vacation, which almost never happens, then I won't be able to change it. It'll be a while before I can actually correct for it. So yeah, I'm guessing that some of the mistakes. Now, is that an excuse? No, but it is an explanation. But I think the problem though is that the way Linus was responding to the criticisms, that's the problem. And hopefully Linus gets to that.
Interdepartment communication and cleaning up our house. What we won't be doing is sanitizing things too much. We know that some of our best videos are centered around Linus and other members of the team just goofing around with tech and having fun. That is not going to stop. But others, like GPU and CPU releases, certainly require all the rigor we can muster. Those launches don't happen as often these days, so it will take some time before you see the full payoff of our continuous improvement.
Another factor that I wonder about, and I've run into this too as a content provider, that the various different content that they have made over the years has resulted in them realizing that some videos get watched a lot more and thus make a lot more money. And they look at the differences between the content. And I'm guessing, who knows, that some of the videos that maybe become viral phenomena are videos in which there are big claims that are made by the tech people, where they look at something and say, this is a piece of crap, something like that, right? Or there's a dramatic development, like the video, the little clips that they showed of Linus as he's trying to use this coolant system, and it's not, he gets really frustrated and he like walks away from the table. Those kinds of videos are, I'm going to take a guess, making a lot more money than a video where they just review a coolant system and everything works out fine. And they're like, yeah, this looks fine. Because sometimes I'll even click on, I don't even care about the coolant system. I vowed the next computer I make, I'm not going to make it myself because things have gotten out of hand. And my last build caught on fire, literally, like I was saying earlier. So I'm like, I'll just have someone else do it or something. But anyway, it's for me, sometimes, even though I'm not in the market for this sort of thing, I'll click on videos where they'll tear something apart because it's just interesting. I'm not proud of that. I think that's actually a destructive impulse that us humans have. But, I'm a human being. And for myself, I have experienced that as well. And I wonder if for them, they realize that, and there's a decision tree there, a Y in the road, where you can say, well, what are you going to do? We can't manufacture dramatic videos. We just have to keep doing what we're doing. And if something dramatic happens, then it happens. Or you think, okay, how can we encourage that? Or even it just kind of gets under your skin. Maybe you're one of the ancillary channels and you realize that you get more attention, more love, maybe a raise or something, maybe a promotion because you had a really dramatic reaction. It's usually negative towards a product. Right? And then it gets on your skin, and subconsciously you like the guy with the mouse, he didn't take the thing off the bottom. As he starts to test it, there could even be and this happens subconsciously, there could be a question in his mind of, are you sure that you inspected the bottom to make sure there's not a protective plastic coating that you need to take off? And or some kind of checks and balances in his head that said, maybe you should make sure, because this is really bad. So maybe something is wrong that you need to adjust. And then because subconsciously he wants to have a big no reaction, this is, can I recommend this? No, this is a terrible product. Because he is incentivized to do that. And maybe he's struggling financially. So there's even another reason in there of just like, ooh, this is my chance. And you overlook something. And so maybe that's been a problem as well. I don't know. I mean, I've run into that for myself but as a professor and as a therapist, I feel, I don't feel comfortable creating content that is purposely sensational. If something sensational happens, I mean, it happened to me early as I started to gain notoriety on YouTube. Some of you might remember when I was watching 90 Day Fiancé, the very first season that I watched 3.5 years ago, and Ash was giving his lecture about the differences between men and women, and I literally fell out of my chair. You might be able to Google it on my channel.
Male is more towards, they're very logical.
No, Ash. Bad Ash. No. So by contrast, women are not logical. It's like a 13-year-old talking about gender. What? Yeah, men are logical and women are emotional. Nope, research does not support that. In fact, it's massively sexist towards women and men. You're equal opportunity sexist to everyone right now. That's fantastic.
I am literally falling out of my chair, cringing at the unscientific claims that he was making about the differences between men and women. And I got a lot of attention for that. People made memes out of it. And I don't know, but maybe I had a temptation to make more content like that, where I fall out of a chair. But I never did. I've never fallen out. I've never had an actual reaction to something and I've seen some pretty interesting things on various different things that I'm reacting to over the past 3.5 years since that moment. But I've never fallen out of my chair, even though, there's an incentive there for me to have that kind of sensationalized reactivity to something, right? But I made a decision, maybe even before I ever became a YouTuber, that I just don't feel comfortable lying or manufacturing fake things. I don't. If I need to do that to make money, I just don't want to do that. So I didn't do that. But you imagine now. I'm not accusing the Linus Group of doing that, but you just wonder if that was getting under their skin. And so then you end up having an incentive to make content that might not necessarily be accurate, but is clickable, right? Because it makes you a lot of money. All right, well, actually, let's adjourn there. I'm sorry I'm yammering so much, but I feel like it might be necessary. And so that'll be the end of that part. And tune in next time when I continue reviewing this situation. And take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.